Welcome back. This is the Social Entrepreneurship Track at TAI Global Summit 2020. Thank you for joining us on day three. I do have Vivek Verma who's joined us today. He's the founder of Upsurge Global and senior advisor at the Telangana State Innovation Cell. He's a strategic thinker and executive coach with over 3 decades of experience, now working towards transforming social impact space. Well, Vivek, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gunjan. And good afternoon, good morning, evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from today at the TAI Global Summit. We were just discussing that in this new world, life has become very different. Earlier, you had to worry about where do I need to reach geographically, do I need to reach physically, and how do I manage the time. Life has become very different now, and hence greetings have also become very different. You don't know who you're meeting. Is that person in the same time zone as yours or some other time zone? So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whichever part of the world you're joining. We are going to be spending the next 1 hour talking about social entrepreneurship, thinking innovatively. And for the hour, we have a panel discussion and we have a keynote which is scheduled for all of us to spend some time on. But before going there, let me try and put the context of what we are attempting to achieve through this 1 hour. While we keep talking about entrepreneurship as a concept, and I think it's a word which is so widely used today, and pretty much everyone and everybody is talking about that. But we thought we will bring a bit of a play between that and innovation, because beyond just looking at maximizing profits, I think social entrepreneurship is also meant to aim to catalyze the whole innovation space, catalyze the whole impact space, catalyze the whole mindset of participation that needs to focus on developmental issues. And we will, with our panelists, discuss about how they are doing this in their own spaces and how we can all learn from their practices, from their own experience, and from their own insights. So, towards that, let me take this opportunity to introduce the three eminent panelists who we have here. It gives me great pleasure to introduce them as real change makers that they are doing, but also as friends who I have known some of them for a while. Let me start by introducing the first of the three panelists we have with us today, which is Mr. Pratik Sinha. Pratik is the editor, co-founder of Alt News, and I'm sure many of you would have heard about Alt News more so in the recent last few months, which is a fact-checking portal that focuses on fact-checking and hate speech in the Indian social media and mainstream media ecosystem. Now, previously, he's worked for over a decade as a software engineer and now is truly bringing his experience and expertise in understanding technology and the entire media space and the combination of that to the fore. He is today considered as a thought leader in the space of social media reality, because quite often we don't know what's posted is right, wrong, real, unreal, what's the story behind it. And he's someone who's now very quickly gained the position of being someone who people rely on. Quite often you read anything, you want to go to Alt News and check whether that's true or not. So that's the man behind running Alt News, and I take this opportunity to welcome him, and he will also share some of his thoughts. So welcome, Pratik. Thank you for joining us
Thank you so
at
much.
this
Thank you.
summit. Yeah. With that, I move to the second panelist that we have today, which is Mr. Yashveer Singh. Yashveer spent over a decade and working and promoting the youth social entrepreneurship as a concept, and has been with the Ashoka Group, Ashoka Fellows, for the past 5.5 years. In addition to all the work he's done at the Ashoka Foundation, he's recently founded and launched a new global community called the Ashoka Young Changemakers. And the idea here is to develop a new program for teen changemakers across the countries and the continents. Develop strategies to unleash power and ideas of these young changemakers to co-leaders. Everyone is a change maker movement, and that's a lot of work that Yashveer has been putting behind. And he's designed the strategy and launched the Youth Years program for Ashoka Innovators for the public in South Asia region, He's created a unique network of social innovators, educational leaders, business leaders, policy makers, and the list can go on, to really create an environment of teamwork, problem solving, and collaborative leadership, especially in children and youth. And he's going to share the perspective from both the Ashoka innovators and more recently the Ashoka change makers, young change makers that he's founded. So thank you, Yashvir, for joining us this afternoon to talk about thinking innovatively. And last but not the least, Hani Bajaj. Hani is a leader in innovation strategy, thinking, and product design. She is someone who has been awarded the Inventor of the Year 2016 award in San Francisco. A decade of Hani's work has been demonstrated, and the leadership and technical talent has been done to develop and deliver outstanding products. In 2019, she co invented Embrace, which is a low cost baby warmer which has saved over 200,000 babies across 22 countries. She designed and launched the Technology Entrepreneurship Program at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. She set up the Studio 5B, an innovation studio at Dr. Reddy's laboratory, to enable a patient-centric approach for innovation across business vertical. And besides doing this, or before doing that, she's worked, actually not before, she has worked with Tata Trust, Boston Consulting Group, Microsoft, MIT. She's held multiple design workshops for people across the world, whether it's in the corporate world or in schools. She holds a degree in English, product design, UX design from Srishti Institute of Art. She's done a PhD fellow in design and technology, which is what she's pursuing. She's done an engineering and management from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So the list once again can go on. But her education at MIT, particularly, was funded by Mr. Ratan Tata after he got to know about the great work that she's doing, and then she had the fortune of coming back and then joining the Tata Group, and she works with the Tata Trust currently. So thank you, Hani, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Vivek. That was a really long intro, but thank you so much.
For when people like you do such a body of work, we are left with no choice but to let the audience know the body of work you've done. So thank you very much, all three of you, to join us this afternoon. And let's start the conversation around thinking innovatively, specifically in context of social entrepreneurship. So Yashvir, I'd like to start with you to understand a little about how does the Ashoka Foundation define social entrepreneurship? Since your founder, Mr. Bill Drayton, is the one who was using this in the very early stages and started the usage of this word somewhere around 1980, if I'm not mistaken. So can you share with us what is your thinking around what is this social entrepreneurship?
Sure. So firstly, I think thank you, Vivek, and the entire team of TIE for inviting me over and also putting this event. Takes a lot to organize a 3-day, 24/7 event, and I'm sure there have been a lot of exciting conversations, and people are taking away a lot of good insights and important learnings from all the conversations. So Vivek, very specifically to answer your question around social entrepreneurship. So Ashoka's journey formally started in 1980, but the thinking or the idea of what a social entrepreneur is germinated in our founder's mind way earlier. So our founder, Mr. Bill Drayton, while he was a young boy, he spent a lot of time in India. And he was specifically also was fortunate to spend some time with Mr. Vinoba Bhave while he was building the Bhudan movement. And he saw the power of how one person with just power of ideas can influence society, can motivate system, and can change the real pattern or real mindset around a particular problem in a society. And that's where the whole ideology that there are individuals who are different from just the thought of doing good, they also are very entrepreneurial in their approach. That germinated, although of course it took a couple of decades for him to kind of really crystallize this idea and start using the term social entrepreneurship. I think there's a lot of literature which also says maybe he was probably the first one who started, but he was certainly the pioneer who used the word. So for him, I think in a very simple term, the way a lot of times when people ask, okay, how did you define social entrepreneurship or who is a social entrepreneur? He very simply puts it as social entrepreneur is someone who will not give someone a fish, or who will not even teach someone how to fish. But a social entrepreneur is someone who will not rest unless they revolutionize the entire fishing industry. So by giving this analogy, I think essentially what he's sharing is that someone who's thinking big, someone who's trying to change a system around a given problem. And that's what I think the initial thinking of Ashoka around who a social entrepreneur is. And our first social entrepreneur also we found in India. Her name was Ms. Gloria D'Souza. She was working to introduce environmental education at that point in time in 1980 in Indian education system. And from that, again, the common definition, if I were to say, is a social entrepreneur is someone who from deep within is committing for the good of all through their work. And what this means is that these individuals are committed individuals who are either using markets, networks, or creating new economies, addressing some of the most pressing challenges of our times. So for us, social entrepreneurship really is bringing that fundamental change in a pattern or mindset of society to eradicate or address an existing social problem at a systems level. So that's how Mr. Bill Drayton started defining, and that's what Ashoka has looked at. And today we have around 4,000 social entrepreneurs, a network of social entrepreneurs, the Ashoka Fellows, who in effect fit into the same definition and who are helping create this big and systemic change at their own level.
And if I was to just ask you a follow-on question, Yashvir, on that, has the definition kind of changed over these last few decades? Has any fundamental, I know minor tweaking would have happened, but I meant at a very fundamental level, has anything changed in terms of doing good for all, or really being at a fundamental level, thinking of change, thinking of solving a problem?
So, as I was just sharing that, because for us, that good for all is something which is so central. And I know since then what has happened is the sector has matured, social entrepreneurship as a sector. So now there are many organizations who are enabling social entrepreneurs, supporting social entrepreneurs. In many countries, I think most of the top schools have social entrepreneurship programs, courses, and so on and so forth. So the take of different organizations and different, I think, thought leaders over a period of time, what we see has changed. Some people also equate social entrepreneurship just to social business. But what I feel is why we have not changed is because ours was so broader right in the beginning. And we were also the model agnostic definition. So we were not limiting that only if you have a social business, you are a social entrepreneur, but it is more of the principles of entrepreneurship which you are trying to use around causing good for all. And I think from that lens, it has more or less been same. What has though happened is our ability now to find these social entrepreneurs, the qualities we look for, that has sharpened. So when we first, I think, looked at, maybe it was more at a broader level, who's doing big scale change. But over a period of time now, it is much more clearer that what we are looking for. But more or less, what I would say is, Vivek, it has stayed the same because we were looking at a more holistic and broader level as an individual, how someone is using entrepreneurial principles to bring large scale social change. And from that definition, I think it has more or less stayed the same.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Yashvir. I think that gives a good perspective from where it all began in, as you said, in 1980, when many of us were not considering this to be an important aspect. Honey, with that, I'd like to move to you and ask you that, we understood from Yashvir and the definition that they defined of what is social entrepreneurship. And I'd like you to kind of throw a little light on what is it that is different between social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship by and large as an overall concept. Are the two the same? Are they different? I think it will be important for people to get a sense of what is the difference between the two, if at all.
So thank you, Vivek, for calling me on this podium. Thank you, Ty, for having me here. If you Google, as the question was asked by Vivek, you can find very interesting answers of what is entrepreneurship and what is social entrepreneurship. But having been an entrepreneur myself, I have a very interesting take on what is entrepreneurship. I personally choose to believe there is no paper written on it or has not been coined by anybody yet. But where does the word entrepreneurship come from? Humans have a very innate nature of doing things which make them immortal, right? The idea is to be, that this continues forever, whether it has been about having, continuing the family legacy, or it has been about business. So I always equate the word entrepreneurship with antarprerna, which is a Sanskrit word, right? Because it comes something from within. You really want to do it. Whether it's social entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship, it really has to be a very big driving force for you to do it. Traditionally, we've looked at entrepreneurship always, and the whole idea has been about, to create a product, a service, a process, or a journey for a consumer to pay. And that is how society has worked, businesses have evolved. But for me, social entrepreneurship goes a step beyond. That entrepreneur is not just for the earlier satisfactory, layers of your Maslow's law of hierarchy, where it is basically, you're achieving materialistic pleasures, or you're achieving societal feedback or cultural inputs, but something beyond that goes back and gives back to society. And that's where I think people started moving towards their business, towards social entrepreneurship. Because for me, that means that you're creating a product, a service, or a process that benefits beyond you and your circle, which is the society. Right? The key difference between commercial entrepreneurship and the primary focus on economic returns, whereas in social entrepreneurship, the focus is on social returns. At a conceptual level, like opportunities may be similar in terms of commerce in social in entrepreneurship, but how do you translate that for the good of not only you, but your teammates, your office, your consumer, your beneficiaries, all of the other stakeholders who in a traditional business becomes just a part of the process. In a social entrepreneurship, you look at that entire feedback loop of not just monetary returns, but social returns, environmental returns, sustainability returns. Traditionally, we've looked at social entrepreneurship at only, institutions and non-profits, etc. But having had the global exposure, my entire perception about why social entrepreneurship need not be a non-profit. There is a clear difference between philanthropy and social entrepreneurship. I have realized that. And I feel that if you are an entrepreneur, you're taking the ownership of everyone in the family and the product, the right product to reach to the customer. But in a social entrepreneurship, you're taking the responsibility of the product journey, of adding to the nation's economy, but also you're thinking of what happens to the product after it goes to the dustbin. So you're thinking about the environmental impact as well. So for me, that is the journey of social entrepreneurship, where you are giving back more than you're taking home.
Thank you. Very, very interesting perspective, and especially given the fact that, like I said, you have done both, you've been on both sides of the coin, if I can call it that, though I don't think there is two sides to the coin. I think it's just one coin with just one side. And I myself think, Hani, that a lot of times people confuse social impact organizations to be NGOs, and quite often confuse that profit is a bad word, which the social development sector should not look at. And I think that is an important perception for people to change, because the bad word is not profit. The bad word, if at all, is what you do with the profit. If you use
Absolutely.
that profit to maximize personal returns, then that certainly is not an accepted area. But if you're using the profits or the sustainability to make the impact grow, I think generating profits out of a social impact or a social entrepreneurship organization is not a bad thing. And I think the world needs more of us to keep talking about this, so that these thin lines that exist between these definitions kind of get clearer, and people understand that philanthropy, giving, charity, social impact, social entrepreneurship is all a continuum, and everything is an important piece, and sustainability is the most important. So thank you, Hani, for sharing a fantastic global perspective, and also especially from someone who's done commercial entrepreneurship, as you called it, and now we are focusing on making a difference, making a change. Not that it's not commercial anymore, but it's also focusing on social returns. So fantastic insights. Appreciate that. With that, Pratik, coming to you, and I think you are in a very interesting space in this world. because today information is very important, but equally important as a problem which gets attached to it is the whole misinformation that is also happening all over the place, and especially the discourse in India. There is a whole lot of misinformation. It's having a huge impact, and this is becoming a very, very important aspect. So we'd like to hear from you that what's happening in this space, and what is it that we should be doing, and being aware, because you are doing some extremely outstanding work in this space. So talk to us a little about this information and hence misinformation.
So, Alt News basically started in 2017. Prior to that, I worked as a software engineer for about 13 years. And I was pretty active on social media starting about 2000. So, Alt News started in 2017. I was pretty active on social media starting in 2013. And I saw this trend where there was this increasing amount of misinformation on social media. That is mostly in the Indian context, it is in form of images and videos misrepresented to claim something that is not. That is the, and then there are these long passages of text. But what I saw starting sort of about 2015-16 was that there was a deliberate attempt to target the minorities in India, and suggesting that they are responsible for all the, everything that's going wrong in India. And there were these violent videos of crimes being committed, which were sort of being used to claim that, look, this is a Muslim killing a Hindu and this and that. So this is a trend that I first noticed in 2015 and 16. And I also saw that journalists, the mainstream media journalists at that point in time, did not have the skills to even sort of track where this video is coming from, where this image is coming from. Now they are doing better. Some of them have been trained in the skills that are needed for digital investigations. But back then, none of that was happening. And that is when the idea first came forth that, me and my co-founder, Mohammed Zubair, both of us are from engineering backgrounds, and that we could use some of our skills to address this issue that, how do you do digital investigations? A lot of journalists are great at doing on-ground investigations, so on and so forth, but how do you do digital investigations? And so that was the concept behind Alt News. That is, we started at looking at misinformation. And since the time we started, the space has become organized in two ways. Number one, the folks who are producing disinformation and misinformation, they have become more and more organized. It is almost at an industrial scale. Right now, farmer protests are happening in India, and we have debunked at least 20 cases of images and videos which have been which represent a completely different event and have been used to show how either that the farmer movement is inspired by Khalistani movement, or to show that they are indulging in a lot of violence and things like that. So there's this concerted effort, and which is used to defame citizen movements. This also happened during Shaheen Bagh and during election cycle, all of that. There's this increasing trend to use misinformation to form narratives. And it is a very, very organized one. It has been weaponized to the point that even ministers, senior politicians, they share misinformation. And not only they share, there's no the value for accountability and authenticity is reducing. They share it and they will never take back. They're like, okay, yeah, I am true. This is what it is, even though it is screamingly false. So that is the space that we are in right now. That is, we are looking at a population which has very little digital literacy in general. A large majority of Indian population has very little digital literacy. The political class has realized that this is an opportunity where you can use propaganda and especially misinformation, where there's a section of the population who probably are not even aware that there's a software called Photoshop. And if you don't know that there's a software called Photoshop, how do you know that an image has been morphed or a video has been morphed? So use this opportunity to drive a narrative, to drive various narratives. And now this has been adopted by political parties of all ideologies, but coming more so from the right-wing ideology at this point in time. and they're using this to to drive narratives, and we come in a space where we are trying to say that, look, this is what, this is how you sift truth from fiction. And we started off as a journalistic forum, and now we are trying to get into the educational space
That's right.
where we realize that educational space is what is going to actually make the real change. So that is where we are at, a journalistic plus educational initiative, and with some technology thrown in.
Fantastic, Pratik. And I think, for the purpose of our focus today, I think it's important that, a lot of the listeners understand that, because from a social impact perspective, from an entrepreneurship perspective, it's important that, we kind of find a method to verify what's coming our way, so that we are better prepared, we are a far more aware citizen in terms of the information we are getting. And I think this by itself will open opportunities, where we can play a role as entrepreneurs. But I think we thought it will be good to get that perspective from you, Pratik, and thank you very much. Coming back to you, Yashveer, and looking at the Ashoka, innovators, we have supported. You mentioned that earlier in your first response, that you have got over 4,000 social entrepreneurs who you call the Ashoka Fellows. So, what has been some of the criteria and the qualities that you look for, when you are identifying these people, when they are the social entrepreneurs, when you're selecting them to your fellowship program, what are the criteria you look for, and how have those criteria played out once they've done the fellowship and they are making a change in the world today? So, if you can talk to us a little about what do you look for?
Sure. So I think, as I was talking earlier, how we define a social entrepreneur, Vivek, there are five broad criterias or qualities which we really look for in a social entrepreneur. The very first one is that, does the entrepreneur have a system changing new idea? Because for us, that's important, that if there is a given problem, and are they able to bring new approach to address that problem, so that new idea part is very important for us. And that's also in some sense a knockout criteria, so to say, which we look for while electing someone as an Ashoka Fellow. The second important criteria is the entrepreneurship part, or the entrepreneurial ability of the person itself, because at the end of the day, they have to build an organization or a movement or a system, or change something. And or the principles or the qualities of any entrepreneur, which is how do you build team, how do you collaborate, and so on and so forth, is something which again we look very deeply. The third important piece, I would say, is the entrepreneur creative. And creativity also is a very important, because Hani earlier was talking about the difference between entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. And sometimes the problem social entrepreneurs solve could be also much more complex. And you also need to bring a lot of creativity to solve that problem, because it's not as straightforward as it looks like. And in some cases, these are issues which are at the mindset level. So are you very creatively trying to change that, bring people on board, and so on and so forth, is the third criteria we look for. The fourth, which is very important, is that are they driven by large scale social impact? And social impact, because I think when we were talking about the definition, we were saying that, okay, of course there are lines getting blurred between entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, but does this entrepreneur truly believe that they are there to create social impact, to change lives, and to be there for the good of all? So driven by social impact becomes the fourth criteria. And the last bit is, I think, do they have strong ethical and moral fiber? Because that's very important for Ashoka as a community, that can we trust these entrepreneurs, or can the entrepreneurs be trusted by the communities they work for? Because that's very important. So these are the five broader criteria, in which of course we go more in detail, and it happens through a lengthy process of conversations, references, field visits, and so on and so forth. But what we have found is, now coming back to your question around how it has it changed over a period of time, what we are seeing is, when you look at an entrepreneur, even in the initial stages with this criteria, because during the initial stages, a lot of times it will be more of their thinking, which we see that is their thinking aligned, because they might not have already had a system change happened under their belt, or they wouldn't have created huge social impact. But are they thinking, does their idea have that potential? And when we do our impact studies, a lot of times what we see is almost 50% of them within 5 years change some sort of national policy around the problem they are trying to solve. Almost more than 70% change the market dynamics around that particular problem from 5 to 7 years of their election. And there are a lot of such metrics on which we evaluate. But we also need to recognize sometimes it's also a field where change might take longer than expected, because as human beings, we also tend to be more focused on impact. But a lot of times in Ashoka's fellowship, we see impact as a long term, how they have changed the field, how they have contributed to the field, rather than looking that more quarterly approach, which sometimes becomes very narrow minded. But yes, those are the few important criterias for us we look at while electing someone as an Ashoka fellow.
Thank you. No wonder Ashoka fellows are what they are, when they go through such an extensive selection criteria. And when you said out of these 4,000 fellows, 50, 60% of them over a period of time have gone on to change a policy or change a practice in the marketplace. Thank you very much for the wonderful work you're doing. And I think the world needs a lot more of this, and, really, really appreciate what Bill started many years ago and what people like you are now kind of carrying forward, and keeping the light glowing forward. So wonderful to understand that. And I think for a lot of us who are either in the space of social entrepreneurship or thinking about this, I think these are important criteria to keep in mind. And when you talked about the 5 criteria, so Hani, moving to you, let me try and put you on a spot and keep with the number that Yashveer talked about. If you were to pick 5 reasons, and say, why is this the right time for social entrepreneurship? As per you, what are 5 reasons why people should consider social entrepreneurship in the current context?
To start with, Vivek, I think we're living in a highly connected and a social world. And I think COVID has taught us that. I think earlier we were just connected, but the users were not on the forum. And now actually we have people finally be connecting with one another. So in terms of the days that we are living in right now, the whole world and the millennials and the Gen Z are known to be like the most socially responsible and more sustainable of the lot. They've started to look at this whole attitude of climate change, act on social matters, going through complicated times. It's been moments where, we can get more creative, more responsible, and more willing to help. And pandemic has been one of the very interesting ways where we've seen people have connected. Metaphorically speaking, something similar has been done in terms of social injustices and environmental issues back in the day. But the connectivity that we have, the power of click and pay, or send money and purchase, or to contribute to social issues, or this whole concept of what Modi is also talking about, buy from local businesses. Even Amazon is trying to say that, right? Don't buy from big dealers, buy from these independent businesses. So the first reason is, the connectivity that we have in today's world, and the streamlining of things, right from buying the product to being able to see the product, to purchasing it, to pay for it, to having it delivered at your doorstep. So we live in a world which has finally got connected. The second is to give a voice to everyone. May was the month where I think all of us heard about this whole thing happening in the US globally on racism and social injustice. And the death of George Floyd was, that started a wave in the US, right? And the Black Lives Matter movement. But from a social entrepreneurship perspective, what we also saw that an inclusive and multicultural team of companies were formed for gifting back in terms of the experiences and enriching their lives and the lives of people who are getting affected by it, right? And people want a voice, a forum to express what they have been feeling for decades. And social entrepreneurship, I am not looking at social entrepreneurship from the point of view of just, giving education, or, giving somebody access to clothing or sustainable clothing. I'm looking at it in matters of gender parity. I'm looking at it in the matters of, inclusivity in offices. I'm talking about, people talking about equality and recognition, pay parity, all of those. So now it's an opportunity to form a business around that. There is actually an HR company which has been formed in the US, which is looking at pay parity and will ensure that you get pay parity when you join, whether you come from any gender.
Wow.
There's been an opportunity of giving people voice and translating those voice and needs and opportunities into business ideas. It's also a time for grabbing attention from investors very, very easily. We have a wide range of sustainability challenges, and investors are starting to reevaluate their portfolio. Traditional portfolios, would give importance to funding only sustainable projects. Sustainable investing considered environmental, social, governance factors that create a positive and lasting impact in the world. To say it simply, it's putting money into projects and ideas that do good in the world. But there is still a long way to go. But as more people become aware of the problems, the investment into ESG projects is going to continue to grow. We can see it in the numbers. In 2012, there was almost 7.3 trillion euros that were invested in Europe. While just 6 years later, we have doubled that number, and now it's almost close to 12 trillion pounds in 2018. So many of the Europe economies, France, most of the Nordics have adapted to new regulations on energy law, cultural shifts that are shaping the landscape of sustainable investing. So from a tax point of view, there is actually something called the Social Investment Tax Relief Scheme for investors now investing in social enterprises. Gaining clients, there is something that we can thank millennials and Gen Z again for it. Nowadays, the public is far more aware of social injustices, environmental problems. They are open and willing to spend money on products and services if that means helping others. They want a story. They don't want to know the shirt is being stitched in Vietnam. But what is that story behind it? Did that mother who stitched the shirt could send her daughter to school? What was the story behind that journey of that shirt? What was my carbon footprint? How much did it actually cost the environment for me to get this shirt? Not just to me to get this shirt. So there's this whole range of customers who want that kind of feedback, right? We're talking about recycled materials coming in use. My last and foremost point will be the fifth, that it connects you to live with a purpose and keeps you motivated. The biggest religion growing currently in the world is atheism. Given the gimmicks and superfluousness of where religion and faith has evolved. And that's where everyone is looking to contribute, give back, kind of do something good before they leave this earth, right? They're forming organizations which stand for their beliefs, their morals, and positions them with the brand values that companies are showcasing. It is connecting the brand's why to how it's being used to help the world make a better place. Earlier, it used to be about, and again, the last point is the reach. It's become so affordable for a brand to do a marketing campaign, which would cost 10 crores at one point of time, now would cost you probably 10,000 rupees on an Instagram story or Facebook, right? And that amount of money can be used in creating a sustainable journey for your consumer, for your other beneficiaries. So I feel it's actually a brilliant time for social entrepreneurships to take over and to move even from the typical things that we have been thinking are actually sustainable businesses. Like
Fantastic.
the HR example I gave you.
Fantastic perspective once again, Honey, to share, and we heard the 5 criteria. We now heard 5 reasons. So if any of you are really looking at, with these 10 inputs, I think it should make a phenomenal method that you can create in the madness for creating what we want to create here. And we talked about this whole new world, which is digital. So coming to you, Pratik, I'd like to continue the conversation we were having with you in terms of why is the social media, which is becoming such an important piece in pretty much everything that we do, why are there not enough methods to be able to curb this, menace of information, the right thing going to people? Because, while it's helping a lot of people in terms of doing these wonderful things that Honey talked about, but it's also creating this whole space that you talked about earlier, where the wrong information is going out. And what's your view, being a person in the technology space now, working in this space, what's stopping these people to really curb this menace?
So the problem is multifold. one of the problems is the social media companies themselves and their business models. Uh, all these companies, their business models are directly proportional to how much engagement they can generate on their platforms. And to keep people engaged, let's say Facebook as a company, to keep people engaged, they want to show them things which they would like to read. And when it comes to politics, all of us have certain biases. And what the algorithms do, the algorithms are designed to do, is to show you things that you already agree with politically. That uh, whichever ideological camp that you belong to. And what that is doing is that is creating these enormous echo chambers where people are stuck in this echo chambers. Uh, now, the other thing that they are trying to do to sort of bring up engagement is to promote sensationalist content. Things that, there's term viral. Something is going viral. There's a lot of sensationalist content that is being promoted because that is what grabs people's attention, and they are allowing people to monetize the sensationalist contest. So for Facebook videos or YouTube videos, you can monetize it. Now, for example, just during pandemic, there's been so much misinformation about you take hot water and lemon, it is going to prevent COVID. You're going to take ginger and garlic, it's going to prevent COVID. During this whole Sushant Singh Rajput thing, there are YouTube videos which went live for 5 hours, 6 hours, trying to show this deep web conspiracy where the murder of Sushant Singh Rajput was being broadcasted live on dark web, and there were people who watched it. And these are not these are crazy people coming in and watching for hours. It is like poisonous entertainment. And and nobody's stopping it. Despite this happening, the platforms are failing to stop this from happening. And it is not because they can't stop this from happening. For example, in case of the New Zealand shooting, where this person, went live on Facebook Live and started shooting people, Facebook acted quite swiftly. In the case of US elections, we have seen that while they have not done all that they could, but they have done much more than what they have done in, let's say, countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and countries which do not belong to the Western ecosystem. For them, it is all about how many people you can get so that they watch the advertisements. If you watch the advertisements, the platforms make money. It is a directly proportional relationship, and that is where, in my opinion, the business model of social media and is problematic. The same issue. So this is how social media is, and as I pointed out earlier, there's a problem with digital literacy, and politicians are using that fault line to promote misinformation. Social media is helping them by all of these false claims are very often sensationalist content, and social media helps them by keeping them afloat. Those are the ones which go viral. That is one thing. The mainstream media also suffers from a similar problem, where it is again an issue of business model. For example, about a year ago or year and a half ago, ABP News tried fact checking the prime minister, and immediately 3 anchors were suspended, and because Patanjali decided to withdraw all the advertisement from ABP News. Until the time these 3 anchors were kicked out, the advertisements did not return. So at Altuse, what we have done is that we don't have a single ad on the website. We depend purely on donations, because in the present state of democracy as it is in India, um, uh, it works in other countries. For example, in the US, New York Times is booming at this point in time. But there, you don't have institutions harassing entrepreneurs just because they may speak up. They may be critical of the government in power. So here we are depending on user donations to get in the funds, because the government can't go and tell somebody that you can't donate 1,000 rupees. They can go and tell somebody you can't donate 10 lakh rupees, but they can't go and tell individuals that you can't donate 1,000 rupees. So that
So
is that.
need to innovate in the business model per se.
Yes.
Fantastic. I think, these are also important lessons we need to learn. And I think, so both parts of it are important in what I heard from you, Pratik. One is the fact that, they are they are able to do, but they're not doing it because that's their business model. And I think maybe people like you, with the support of many others, should kind of drive to say that, there is an alternate business model which is possible. And hence, at least some of these companies can, become a little more responsible, because that will again have an impact on what's happening in the world. With that, moving on, Yashvir, coming back to you, so the journey of Ashoka's, and has been around change makers, and it's the narrative is kind of slowly now shifting from building of the social entrepreneurs to building a society where everyone is a change maker. Earlier it was about a few selected people, and I think there is this whole thinking with the various programs you're doing, including the Ashoka Young Change Makers program. So can you talk to us about this shift that is, focusing less on the change makers and making everyone is a change maker, and what's happening in that space with the Ashoka programs?
Sure. Thank you, Vivek. As I was talking, so 40 years is a long time. And as I was talking that these entrepreneurs we work with are very inspiring. And so while we started working with them, we started observing certain patterns. And a lot of those patterns were around different sectors and the way things are changing and so on and so forth. But one of the fundamental pattern, and as I said, we also look at our impact studies over a period of time. And one of the common threads which emerged from the lives of these social entrepreneurs is that most of them, while growing up, were practicing to be a change maker very early on in life. And let's take a couple of examples. For instance, our Nobel Peace Prize winner from India, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi ji, he was changing the challenge of caste system in his village while he was 15, 16. And it's not a outlier example, but majority of our social entrepreneurs growing up as teenagers were building some ideas either at their school level, community level, or something. And essentially what that meant is that how we all have grown up either reading, writing, or building a certain skill, whether it could be math or anything, any skill which we have picked up while growing up. Similarly, these social entrepreneurs have also built that mindset, because somewhere very early on, either they picked up those skills, which we call now as change maker skills, the skill of empathy, teamwork, working collaboratively, and solving problems around them at a very young age, right? And what we really felt is, so when we started Ashoka, of course, the thinking was, if we support these social entrepreneurs, if we build the community, if there is a network effect, that automatically at some stage will solve all the problems of the world, because when these social entrepreneurs scale their initiatives, problems will reduce. But one of the things which I think which we observed and which we all are observing, that world is changing at a very fast pace, more than we all can imagine. Every minute there is new information being solved. The way our society is organizing is also changing. And to deal with such a fast changing world, I think we need to provide the ability, the mindset which these social entrepreneurs have to every individual, so that they can empathize, they can work in teams, and they can solve problems at their own level. And that was the basis, that one, the insight and the observation that the reason these social entrepreneurs are who they are is because of their early life experiences in most of the cases. And imagine if we can provide the same experience to every young person growing up, the way they will grow up will be completely different. Their mindset towards society will be completely different. And in last, I think 6 to 8 months, I have been on a lot of panels where we are now talking about how do we educate our young people, or what sort of changes should we have in the growing up experiences. But for Ashoka, I think that was a very natural insight which had come looking at the life of these social entrepreneurs and how they have grown up. And that's why now we believe that for us to have a vision where the society can live in harmony, in a very peaceful and cooperative manner, is only when every individual feels powerful. And that power in every individual will come when they have that ability to change things around them, to stand for themselves, and to create change around them. And that's why I think from last couple of decades now, our focus is also moving that as much as we want to continue building our community of social entrepreneurs, can we create a world, or at least give a framework to different institutions, different policy makers, that the benefit or the win of the society as a whole will be if everyone is a change maker. And that I know is a very ambitious goal. But certainly, I think not long ago in future, no one believed that one day everyone can read, write.
Correct.
Almost 100, 200 years back, I think that was not the norm. Today, that's the norm. Now, another norm is around digital education and technology. So we believe, I think, that we are on the same path of creating that norm that every person growing up should practice to be a change maker, and that should become a way of life.
Yeah, as we learn in the entrepreneurial world that everything is about big lofty ideas and then making that happen. So I think this is also a fantastic big idea, and I wish all the best to the Ashoka fellows and the whole program that does become a reality. From that, Pratik, I'd like to come to you and say that in this whole space, when we want everyone to become a change maker like the Ashoka program is talking about, what do you think needs to change in the education system, where we bring the concept? And Hani also talked about it earlier, and Yashvir talked about it, the whole the value system, the integrity, the ethical and moral kind of fiber that we talked about. So is there anything you want to share about what needs to reform in the education system? Because some of it is also leading to this whole misinformation piece. So what can change, or what should change rather, for this to become a better reality?
See, I'm not an expert when it comes to education. It is not a field where I worked on, but I can see the lacunae. I can see what
Yeah,
is
yeah,
missing,
correct.
and that is the lacunae we are hoping to fill. I don't know if we're doing it the right way or not, but in right now the huge lacunae is people not being able to think critically. We are living in a world of information overload. There's information that is being bombarded from all sides, whether it's Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, so on and so forth. And we are taking decisions about various decisions of life based on this information. For a student, it may be which is the next college to choose, or for somebody which is the next job, and for a citizen it would be who to vote. There are these various decisions that are being driven by the information world that we are living in. And I believe that when it comes to education, these we can help people make better decisions by helping them think more critically, helping them, giving them the ability to analyze this data around them, in a more organized fashion. So recently, a school in Rajkot in Gujarat, a teacher gave an essay to, this was a class of 20 girls, 8th standard, that, write an essay on COVID and, what are the causes for it. And what happened was that they wrote an essay which was full of WhatsApp forwards, that if you stop your breath for a minute, it is a way to detect whether you have COVID or not. If you have this, this is an image. In Italy, people are on the roads, dying on the roads because of COVID. All of these we sort of map to various WhatsApp forwards, and then we did a talk with them to tell them, how do you evaluate sources? And then they made a skit and showed it to the whole school based on the talk that we gave to them. Now, this is at a very, 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 very tiny level. There are other examples of, education, of awareness initiatives that have been done. For example, there's been one done in Kannur for vaccination. There was this measles rubella vaccine. The vaccination rate was dropping, and the collector there did awareness drives on a similar line. So these are from my perspective, I see there's a huge lacuna in terms of, teaching young children how to process the information world they
Information.
live in.
Correct.
And that
Check
is
that
where
also. And
yes,
check that also, find a method to kind of verify before,
yes.
they kind of look
Even
at it.
before, see, in your day life, as you said, you're going in from a meeting, coming out from a meeting. Now, at the end of the day, you get a WhatsApp forward. You may not have the time to go to your laptop, check whether this is true or not. But at least we need to develop a system where people are able to identify what may be true or what may be false. At least that system needs to be developed. And a lot of us do better than others. And just because we have had the exposure, for example, the very fact that I think one of the things that Altius can be credited with is that in India, at least, we have brought the issue of misinformation to the fore. Now, people, at least a certain small section of the population, is aware that, look, there is this huge issue of misinformation. And when that awareness comes, then you're like, okay, is this true or not? Should I forward this or not? That question has to
Journey has
come. And
become.
once,
Correct. That journey has begun, and I think it is something
yeah,
where people like you, I think, need to continue to drive that. Not just like I said in the space of information or misinformation, but it's also about other parts that we need to do as we
yeah.
kind of go forward and look at a lot of the other spaces. So I think we seem to have lost Honey. I guess maybe some technology challenge or connectivity issue. We'll see if she does join back. But I think in any case, we were coming to the end of the hour that we had, and I also wanted to make sure that I let some of you know that we were expecting Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, who's the Principal Secretary IT and Industries from the government of Telangana, to join us. Unfortunately, he has been delayed in a state event, which is kind of getting delayed beyond his this thing. So he's sent his regret to be able to join us, but he's also sent his wishes to all of us, and his remarks, or his sorry, not remarks, his comments to all of you, that we should make the best use of this large summit that's happening here. And at this stage, coming to the end of the hour, I would like to take this opportunity. We can continue this conversation, especially when it is about change, when it is about making a difference in the way the world looks at social entrepreneurship, especially wearing the lens of innovation, wearing the lens of kind of entrepreneurship from innovation thinking. I think it's something we can go on, and especially when we have people like Yashveer, Pratik, and Honey, who we seem to have lost just now, but people who are making a big difference to the world. But unfortunately, there are many more things that we do want to hear about. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Yashveer and thank Pratik for joining us today and sharing the perspective that's happening at the Ashoka Innovators and Ashoka Young Changemakers program that you're running, Yashveer, and Pratik, the great work that you're doing at Alt News to help all of us understand the difference between right information, wrong information, and like you rightly said a little while back, the awareness that we need to verify, we need to check, and we need to be aware. So thank you very much for both of you, and for Honey to have joined us. And I think one of the good things this world is also teaching us is the value of time. And I'm so glad that we are able to finish our session just in time, because here Gunjan is back to tell us that we need to move forward with the rest of the event. So Gunjan, we are on track, and I take this opportunity to thank you, Yashveer, thank you, Pratik, and thank you,
Thank you.
Honey, for joining us today. And back to you, Gunjan, to help take the program forward.
Thank you, Vivek. I don't think there's anything for me to conclude here. You have not only done a wonderful job at concluding what we really got out of this session, but also pick their brains and get us some of the very important information where entrepreneurship is actually leading us to. So thank you so much, Vivek, for doing that. And of course, thank you to Yashveer, Pratik, and Honey, who we lost at some point. Thank you again for giving us the time here at TIE. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.